If you're sick of blowing up halfway through workouts, then this episode is going to fix that. We're talking about a brutal but insanely effective method called severe intensity domain intervals, or SIDS, as I call it. I know it sounds like some sort of a disease, but this is where elite conditioning is built. And it's not cruising, it's not pacing, it's just raw oxygen-sucking effort that forces your body to level up fast. And what's going to happen is you're going to breathe better, recover faster, and actually push harder when it matters most. So stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to know exactly how to do it and why most people are actually too scared to train this way. But real quick, this podcast only grows one way, and that's through people like you. So if you get something out of this today, do me a favor and send it to someone who needs it, or leave me a quick review so more people can find it and level up their fitness. Let's define terms now. So we already went over SID, so severe intensity domain intervals. That's the main thing we'll be talking about. And what we're training here is above your critical power point, so above what you think you can actually handle. And it's the tipping point where you can actually reach a steady state. And this isn't just moderate cardio, it's controlled suffering. This is a good way to put it. And it's a zone that actually forces adaptation. So a lot of times we stay in our comfort zone, but this is going to force you outside of that because it's the only way to keep leveling up. And unfortunately, one of the many lovely benefits of getting fitter is the fact that you have to maintain that, or the only way to get better at that is to make yourself feel like a beginner again by making it suck even more. And that's just that keep leveling up, just adding layers to it is where we actually keep making progress. And studies show that VO2 max and max oxygen, VO2 max, which is the max oxygen your body can use, and critical power, how much power you can sustain, comes fastest from this style. So you are going to get a better VO2 max and better critical power from training this way. And the best intervals last anywhere between 2 to 10 minutes. And this is where you're tapping into maximal aerobic energy, but before you're going into full muscular blowout. So 10 minutes is actually really pushing it. I'd very rarely have people go into that 10-minute domain unless you are a very high-level athlete. 2 minutes is like a great place to start. And then anywhere in between there, I really like the 4 to 6 minute range is usually where I find the most benefit for about 80% of the population. And SID intervals keep oxygen uptake high through the entire time. So there's no cruising, okay? So this should be a very hard effort. This should be used with cyclical movements. This should be a very high intensity, very uncomfortable the entire time. And a key stat I'm going to drop here is that athletes who added SID intervals 1 time per week minimum saw anywhere between up to 6 to 8% improvements in VO2 max in under 8 weeks. And this was a study not done by me. I don't have the study here listed, but it was from another CrossFit coach. So what you're going to get out of this today is, first off, a huge aerobic engine. So you actually breathe easier under heavy fatigue. And this is such an advantage when it comes to, even if you're not a competitor, if you could take one thing out, like if your muscles are going to burn and it's going to be hard to breathe, you might as well remove one of those, which I would take the breathing, because it makes it 10 times more comfortable. And also, the easier it is to breathe, the easier it is to flush lactate out of your system. So the burning sensation won't be there nearly as long, especially post-workout. And then the bigger critical power, meaning that your red line, critical power is also another term, a technical term for red line, is now faster, heavier, and longer. So you'll be able to reach a much higher threshold and be able to sustain that at a much longer intensity and pace. And you're going to get better endurance at high intensity. So hanging on the final, onto the final 5 minutes of an open workout or another workout. Imagine instead of like having to push in the last 30 seconds, which is what usually I did when I wasn't as fit. I could only really push hard the last 30 seconds to 1 minute. But imagine if you could push really hard in 5 minutes, how much better that will not only feel, but in terms of the results you'll get from that. And you're going to have a faster recovery between hard bouts or intervals. So 30 seconds to reset instead of 2 minutes gasping for air. So which is a huge advantage as well. Because especially even if you're not doing intervals, there's nothing better than getting done with an extremely difficult workout and being able to recover and being able to go out throughout your day and then actually being able to enjoy your day because you're recovering better. And I think this is what kind of gets people burned out from CrossFit, is that they don't really train this engine enough. They don't train their red line, critical power, and VO2 enough to the point where they use oxygen so efficiently to the point where they recover extremely well after the workout is actually over. And your ability to go hard without blowing up early is going to increase as well. So you just won't survive workouts. You're actually going to dominate the second half of workouts, because what usually happens, and I'm the victim of this as well, is that the first half goes great. Usually, I mean, most of the time, it's actually only about the first minute or the first 10 reps that go great. And then after that, it's just a downward spiral and a crawl to the finish line. But instead of doing that, if you train the right way, you can actually make the workout easier and actually have enough gas in the tank, even though you are going pretty hard up front, but have enough in the tank to be left over to actually dominate and do very well in the second half of the workout. So here's how to actually apply this. So you're going to pick a monostructural movement. So we're talking like row, run, ski, echo bike, whatever. Something very cyclical and aerobic. So no barbell, no kettlebell, no nothing, no burpees, thank God. But modalities that you can keep moving without technique breaking down. So basically low skill stuff, all right? Your technique can break down a little bit on running, but let's not get into that. And then your interval range here is going to be between 4 and 6 minutes per interval. That's usually the sweet spot. Okay, you can go all the way up to 10. 10 is pushing it. I think 2 is a little low, but 2 is a great spot to start if you've never done this before, because sustaining 2 minutes at a very high pace is a little bit more mentally doable than if just jumping right into 4 to 6 minutes. So you want to keep it within that tight window. Again, 4 to 6 minutes is where I typically see the best gains coming from people, from about 80% of the time. And then pacing here, you just want to go slightly faster than I would call, like, if you're doing a run, like slightly faster than like a 5K pace or your aerobic threshold pace, if you actually know what that is. If you're not sure what that is, just go harder than you normally do and make it uncomfortable. I mean, really, pacing and having these percentages, even percentages on lifts, are just frameworks and gives you a guide, but you don't have to be married to it. Okay, it is a little bit science dripped in there, but your body's going to adapt regardless of what stimulus you do, as long as you make it uncomfortable and you're being productive with it. And then in terms of rest periods, so these are interval based, because and you are going to rest about 2 to 4 minutes max between each set. So 4 minutes on the upper range, 2 minutes on the lower range, but we do want a full rest. We don't want a full rest, because that kind of defeats the point. We want to keep the heart rate up. And sometimes even I'll have people do light activity during those 2 to 4 minutes rest. So they'll do like a light row, they'll walk, they'll do like an easy echo bike during that 2 to 4 minutes rest. And in terms of working sets, you want this to be 4 to 6 total working sets. And then we're going to progress this over time. And we're going to either aim for faster paces or shorter rest, but we're not going to do both at once. Okay. So we either want to, so I really don't need to go into that. But over time, when we progress, we want to keep it pretty much exactly the same. I like to increase the pace first. And then over time, once the pace has been increased almost to the point of where we can't really increase it that much anymore, that's when we start reducing the rest time. So that's usually how I structure things, and that's where we see the best results. And a little pro tip here is that you don't want to add skill or heavy lifting into these until you're fluent with the pure monostructural movement with the sit intervals itself. Now, you can do lifting or skill work or, gymnastics paired with these, but when you're first starting out, not a good idea. And I would even argue that you probably not until you're more of an advanced athlete that you should start adding in some of those mixed modal components. So let's get into what this feels and what it looks like. So during the interval, you should be uncomfortable, but moving well. Okay, that's very important. Breathing heavy, but you shouldn't be gasping for air. Okay, this shouldn't be an all-out effort. You need to leave a little bit in the tank to where you can do another interval. Okay, hence the point. And then the lungs and legs should be burning, but you should be able to hold form. Okay, this shouldn't be like a WOD drunk, Vegas style CrossFit here. And between intervals, you should recover about 60 to 70% back. So not a full recovery, because then we're training too much power. We are training capacity here in VO2. So about 60%, 60 to 70% recovery. You shouldn't be 100% ready to go for the next one. You should be a little uncomfortable, but you should be like, oh crap, here we go again. But you're still working to lower your heart rate. So this is really working on getting the heart rate and the breathing lower in between intervals, which makes your aerobic system and VO2 more efficient for workouts themselves. And then after the session, you're going to feel gassed, but clean and powerful, kind of tired, and you won't feel broken from this, especially if you're sticking with monostructural stuff first. And over 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to hit WODs, runs, and longer Metcons feeling like you have a little extra gear. All right, so a little bit, especially late in the extra workout. So a gear being that, not like you're carrying anything, but gear like as in you'll be able to hightail it up a little extra notch in like the final few minutes of the workout. And that's the goal right here. And really the thing that you should kind of picture yourself here is, you versus old you. So old you crashes at the 7-minute mark in a 20-minute AMRAP, but the new you hits the 10-minute mark at the same effort, and then is able to even push harder for the final 10 minutes. That is the goal here when we're training these SID intervals. And so the problem that these solve is that, first off, problem number one is that if you gas out halfway through tough workouts, you won't. And problem number two is that you'll hit PRs fresh but fall short under fatigue. And problem three is that that it'll solve is that if you can't maintain paces past 2 to 3 minutes without crashing, you're going to get better by doing these. The fourth problem it's going to solve is that if you feel stuck at a certain engine level, meaning that you just can't keep going harder, you just don't have the energy to even push harder, no matter how many Metcons you do, this is going to help you push through that plateau. Great for plateau breaking, especially when doing CrossFit, and very easy to do. I mean, just takes very minimal warm up. And then you can just get right into it. 4 to 6 sets. And then I usually like to start around 2 to 4 minutes. So you're over with that pretty quickly. And as long as you're giving full effort on, or major effort on that, then you're going to see results from that. I mean, it's very unreasonable not to, as long as you're actually getting the proper stimulus out of it. And finally, the fifth problem this solves is that, a lot of people are scared about pacing because you're afraid that you're going to red line too soon. And the thing that's great about this is that you'll actually be able to push that red line back a lot further to where you won't red line until a lot later in the workout and you're already being able to sustain a much higher pace on the front end of the workout. So the blunt truth here is that if you're not doing these without SID interval work, you're always going to be stuck at lower fitness ceiling that what you're capable of, because you never push past through that threshold. So you have to train above the threshold that what you think that what you're comfortable with in order to keep making progress. Think of like the first time you did a CrossFit workout, or think of the first time you just started CrossFit and seeing all the beginner gains you got. And a lot of it was just simply because the body was forced to adapt. Okay. So what happens is that the body, when you train especially hard, the body just immediately reads that as a stimulus that I am inadequate to sustain this physical task. So therefore, the body is forced to adapt to that task. And that's where progress comes in, period. So that's why we have progressive overload. And this is a very similar structure of progressive overload, but strictly for improving VO2 max, red line, and critical power. So, at the end of the day, what you're doing here is you're going to build your floor, you're going to raise your ceiling, and you really only need to do this. Start with 1 session per week. You can go all the way up to 3 to 4. 4 is pretty tough, especially with time management, but it can happen. So start with 1. That's my only challenge with you. Start with 1. Start with something with a machine that you like. Go for 4 minutes, 2 to 4 minutes. Probably start with 4. Take 4 minutes off. And make sure you're going hard enough to where you can only recover about 60 to 70% before the next interval. And if you stay consistent in 8 weeks, you're going to feel like an entirely different athlete. I can flat out guarantee it. So thank you so much for listening. If this was helpful, do me a favor and leave me a 5-star review so that way we know to make more content just like this. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Red Wolf CrossFit and DM your content suggestions there. Love to hear from you. Till next time, good luck. Have fun. Nailed it.